The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.
Welcome to Meeting Malcolmus, a pavement podcast. Hey, it's JD here, back for another week of hauling on the vape that is the discography of seminal indie rock band Pavement, looking for that fix inside my lungs so that I know it's working. You know what I'm saying? How you doing? Back again. The show was over, and this is the third episode I've done since I ended the show. So, no. I did the April Fool's episode, announced the pod list, and now today, that's 3. So, apologies if you were hoping that you had gotten rid of me, but you haven't, because I'm still here, and occasionally I will have things to say, like today, for example. I can tell you right off the bat that I'll be doing another episode close following the opening show, the secret show in Los Angeles, coming up in, I guess, about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. So, I managed to get a ticket for that, and it just worked out that I'm going to be in Vegas, and I found a flight to LA for like $29. So I'm going to fly into LA, maybe catch a baseball game or 2, and watch the boys. That's going to be so fun, right? I think it's going to be pretty cool. How are you doing? I hope everybody is doing well. I am, struggling a little bit, I would say. I'm happy that all this stuff is coming up, but, it's tough. It's tough not working and languishing, the way I am. And, I don't know. So it kind of sucks, but there's things to look forward to. So there's that. I do hope that this finds you well, and I've got a couple friends that have long COVID, and it seems like it's a terrible thing. So I hope nobody out there is experiencing that, or if you have got it, it went away, or all that good stuff. So why am I here? Well, there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to pop up. Well, no, actually, there's only one. I wanted to just check in and say hey, and I also wanted to play an interview that I did with Daniel Efram of the Steve Keene art book. I met with him last week a day, and we talked for 30 or 40 minutes about the project and about what he's doing, and it's pretty fucking cool. This is a coffee table book for those of you that have a reinforced coffee table. This sucker is 6 pounds. It's designed to be to fit in your LP shelf. So it's 12 by 12. So it's got the same sort of dimensions as an LP, and that's pretty cool. A lot of the artwork in there is like LP sized. It's looks like a beautiful project, just a labor of love. And Daniel walked me through it all, how he sort of became part of the project, what he's been up to, what he's been doing, and all that good stuff. So I thought I would let you hear that, and maybe we'll listen to a Pavement song. And oh shit, before I go for this episode, because we're going to listen to a song and then go right into this interview, I want to let you know that Daniel has decided to carve out a bit of a deal for Meeting Alchemists listeners, and you can score that deal by purchasing the book. Hold on, I'm going to pull up this email right now. Oh shit! It's a link. I'll put it in the show notes, the link. But basically, if you go to Hat and Beard Press and look at the Steve Keene art book, put it in your cart and add, it's just beautiful. It's really a nice looking book. If you put in the code Farewell Horizontal 2022, all uppercase, Farewell Horizontal 2022, that'll get you 15% off. It's a $95 book, so you're going to save about $15. That's not so bad for just listening to, 10 minutes of a podcast. I would say if you're interested even remotely, take advantage of that offer and get this thing in your hands. Again, a labor of love. Keene has a neat history interwoven with Berman and Malk. And yeah. I'm reluctant to say his full name because I got called out recently for the way I pronounce SM's name, and it's got me all sensitive. I guess, just sort of the way it falls out of my mouth, there's an extra syllable, and I don't mean it. I don't mean for it to. I know it's, I know it's not milk hummus, but I guess just the way I say Malcolmus, it's like it comes out. Malcolmus. Yeah, I don't know, man. I suck. I talked to the man and he didn't correct me. So what can you do? Anyway, let's listen to, what have I got here? This is live from the Palace. This is Heckler Spray and In the Mouth, a Desert. So give this a listen. And on the other side, we'll go right into that interview with Daniel. Thanks so much for checking us out today. Hope you're well. 15% off Farewell Horizontal 2022. Hatandbeardpress.com. Have at her. For now, this is Heckler Spray and In the Mouth, a Desert. Live from the Palace on Meeting Alchemists, a Pavement podcast. Fuck, I just did it again, didn't I?
ground out of sight. And if the sight is just a horse sign, can it make enough sense to me? Pretend the table is a trust fund. We'll put our labels down, babies down. I'll watch the yards entwine unravel, and you'll never get it back. It's what I want, it's what I want, it's what I want, it's what I want, it's what I want. Don't you know I could make it try, make it try, make it try, make it try. I've been down, king of it is all we have. And I could wait to hear the words of that diamond shot today. What I want, what I want. It's what I want. It's what I want. It's what I want. It's what I want. Don't you know I can make it try, make it try, make it try, make it try. Well, I've been down. Well, I've been down, 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 down.
So let me just start by asking you like sort of a general question, and that's where we'll fade the interview up from this point. Like this is where, you'll see what I mean if you listen to it. But yeah, we'll fade up from this point. So this will be it'll sound like we've been world friends and we've been talking for 10 or 20 minutes at this point. But for real, we've only been talking for just a couple.
But to be clear, I do feel like you're an old friend already.
Well, we've exchanged quite a few emails. And I'm glad this was it. I'm glad I'm able to do this for you. Like it was just like, what a shit show. Like I was like, dude, Malcolm, like SM reached out to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrapped the show, because the show was called Meeting Malcolmus, and it's like I met him, and it was like, Jesus Christ. I've just finished the show. So when I sent you that email, I'm like, golly, I don't know what to do. Like I'm sort of done the show. But now I guess what I'm doing is I'm just sort of popping in every month or so, and just sort of, especially because there's so much pavement news right now.
Yeah, totally.
So this is, I thought this worked out well. So this will come out the 1st of May.
It's awesome. I love
it. Okay. So, and it's Daniel Efram, right? Like EA, like A. Like
actually,
F,
it's more like it's a soft E, so it's Efram.
Efram, okay.
Like with a PHRUM.
Efram. I can handle that. I thought you were making a Canadian joke yesterday when you said EH, right? When you were like, I was like, I got this.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Of course I would. That's the first time I've communicated with a Canadian podcaster about the pronunciation. And prior to this, in here in the States, I haven't they've all got it wrong. And I hadn't thought about that. Like, oh, people get my name wrong. I just never really thought about it. So you're the first person I ever said that to, and it got interpreted wrong.
Well, my Canadianness came out. That's all.
Oh my God. Hilarious. Anyway, sorry.
So
I'm
Daniel,
already enjoying it.
So Daniel, tell me a little bit about you. Before we get into the book and before we get into Steve Keene, I would like to know, sort of what makes you tick, and how you, if you want to go from biography to how you got involved in this project, then that would be just lovely. You could dovetail that right in.
Sure. I've been a fan of music all my life. I grew up playing classical music. Actually, my dad was a professional classical musician for 64 years, and
wow.
so I grew up as playing classical music. And my mom. So my dad was a professional musician. My mom was a social worker. I became the perfect genetic hybrid. I was destined to manage musicians and artists. So I was destined for this. I blame them for it. They're no longer around, so they can't retort this. So they can't fight it. It is what it is. It is my story. And so anyway, I grew up, really being an advocate for just, what I considered cool things. At that time, it was like some form of rock and roll or punk rock or whatever. Early on, I was a DJ in high school. I was a DJ at a college radio station, and I put on shows and so forth. And
which station, which college did you go to?
Well, in high school, I was in high school, but I DJ'd at Vassar College. In my hometown in Poughkeepsie, New York, and so. I was just hanging around the station too much. I was that annoying kid that was just waiting for the new records to come in. And there wasn't a whole lot to do in Poughkeepsie. So like that was like the thing that I thought, loner music kids did, which was in essence like me and 5 other people. But anyway, so they ended up giving me a show just probably to get rid of me. Someone didn't show up for a shift. Why don't you get on air and stop bugging me for looking at the new releases this week? Go on the air and, help us out. And it sort of went from there. And then I ended up, it just ended up being that I had friends that played in bands, and we did do-it-yourself shows, and I promoted them on as a high schooler on this college radio show. I promoted the shows, of course, as well. And it just kind of moved from there. Eventually it would be my career for, about 25 years. I was managing musicians, advocating for projects, etc. I probably worked on, again, this is a very loose number because I always say I probably worked on 100 music albums. And I'm sure I did. But it was, various levels. Some of them I was like finding the deals for the bands and, dealing with administrating the finances to make sure the records are done. Some I was consulting on like, hey, what should I do with this record marketing wise? How would I make this record float somewhere? How can I get people's interest with this? I was helping musicians. So I worked on a lot of projects is basically what I'm saying with that. And, I've over the years, I worked with bands and a lot of bands that kind of flew in and out of the Steve Keene ether. And, from managing wise, I manage and still technically manage the Apples in Stereo. Who are really on permanent hiatus at this point, but I do have things to do. In fact, today for them, which is a rarity, but it is something I have to do. But I've managed a lot of different bands over the years, and I also managed. I've worked on films as a producer, and also now as my primary interest now is as a photo documentarian, cinematographer, videographer. Doing all types of kind of telling stories of some sort, and. Our relationship is a long one, and it kind of developed from my work in the music business.
Interesting. So let's talk about that convergence then. When did you first meet Steve Keene?
I came across Steve at a place in New York called the Threadwaxing Space, which was a really important but very short-lived few years, cultural gallery, venue, kind of art space. And I came across him. He in essence, he was that was where he was putting up his works from floor to ceiling, and that was where I first experienced him selling his artworks. For a couple bucks a piece, and they were just strewn all over the place at these shows. And as I would go around town on the indie rock circuit in the 90s. This is like 94-ish, 95-ish in New York City. What was happening was there was, he everywhere it seemed like he was selling his work at merch tables. So all the different clubs had Steve Keene stuff for sale, as well as, the band you came to see that night. And so it just kind of, that's when I first came into contact with Steve in the mid 90s, I guess it would be more appropriate to say. And eventually we ended up working on a compilation record for the Threadwaxing Space called Threadwaxing Space Live. And the space itself, the curators, seemingly, in a perfectly chosen way, chose their artists that they have been working with the most. They chose Steve to do the artwork. And so as I was working at a record label at the time, and so I helped, coordinate this record and was part of that indie rock scene at the time, which really is probably most noted for spawning Guided by Voices in New York.
Okay.
So one of the big shows that Guided by Voices played at that point, they were really, really, really buzzing at the time. I think they had just put out the records that had just been the first ones that were distributed officially. I don't think they had yet signed to Matador. Maybe they had, but it was right at the beginning. And they played a few, I believe they played more than one show, but at the Threadwaxing Space, and that was kind of a big deal. And I think MTV came and it kind of sort of launched them. And so, this idea of making a record, a compilation record of some of the great shows that the space was putting on was a good idea. And so in essence, we put together, the record label was called 0 Hour, and we ended up putting out a compilation that Steve designed the artwork for, or came up with the cover art for, rather. It was designed by another now very important contemporary artist, Ryan McGinnis. So the designer is Ryan McGinnis, and the person who created the artwork is Steve Keene. And lo and behold, both of them are still kicking and doing really important, great work. And I had for projects down the line, they would work together again.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, how does the link work between Keene and Berman and ultimately Pavement?
Well, that's, Steve would be best to answer this, but my loose understanding of this is that in essence they all DJ'd at WTJU in Charlottesville, Virginia,
right,
at the same time, and so my understanding is that they ended up being housemates at one point as well. And Steve was a little bit older than them, but he saw that they were just really starting to make music together in very loose forms at that point. Again, this is my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And so, he just saw something that he really liked, and he thought they were on the up. He liked what they were about. They seemed to like the same music, and he just it seemed like they all liked to be around each other. And as they kind of progressed, I think that, as Steve moved to New York, and then, every indie rock trail goes through, New York and Los Angeles and Toronto, of course. And sometimes Montreal, sometimes Vancouver. Yeah. But you make it through, and I think that they ended up being that there was this crossover where Malcolm was living in New York, Steve was living in New York. A bunch of the other members, if they weren't in New York at the time, they were close by. I don't know if Steve West or Cannonberg were living in New York or not. I don't know that. Maybe you know.
Yeah, I don't think they were ever in New York proper, but I mean that doesn't change the story.
Yeah, I'm just curious for my own, because I know Malcolm did live in New York and notoriously worked at the Whitney and so forth.
That's right. Yeah.
So these are like interesting little sidebars because Steve, is it's interesting that Stephen Malcolm was working at the Whitney, and obviously that's one frame of reference for the art world, a very important one. And, Steve Keene is kind of making his own mark in his own way. At the same time, he's on a big upswing at that very moment, is about to make, history, if you will, in a couple years with working on the Pavement record. So it's kind of it's an interesting thing how all this blends together.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that history that they made when it comes to the Wowie Zowie cover artwork. What can you share with us about that, if anything? I'm not sure whether you've got insight into that. I mean, I know that we've spoke. Bobby from Atlanta spoke with Mark O, who talked about the album cover to a certain degree. But I'm wondering if you have a more Steve centric version of that tale.
I wish I did. I don't. What I can say is, from my own perspective, is that when I had been familiar with Pavement from their previous releases, because you literally had to be, indoctrinated. Like if you didn't know Pavement at that point, you were missing out. And I was supposedly part of the music business, so I had to know who it was. And I was a fan. But I became like most, when Steve worked on Wowie Zowie was when it kind of hit me as to like, wow, this is his work finally hit me. And it also started this other buzz. So there's already this talk about, Pavement for obviously there are other reasons, Crooked Rain, etc. There's this talk about Pavement for those reasons. And then one of my favorite artists does this newly found painters does this album artwork, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm in the epicenter of all things happening in indie rock right now. I felt like I was on the precipice of just being in an important place. That's what I felt like.
Oh, that's so cool.
I didn't necessarily feel important, like I was important. I just felt, I'm like, wow, there's some really interesting stuff happening here. The Guided by Voices show where they get discovered by MTV, the album that the record label that I worked at and several of my friends worked at as well, and we're doing this really cool album. And then, and all mixed into this vortex is, Wowie Zowie. So to me, this is all kind of like this sort of a real milestone period of time where I'm introduced to a world beyond music as well. So what also Wowie Zowie means to me, again, slightly different. It's not telling stories about exactly how that happened, because I don't have that insight like Mark O would, who helped me with the book that we'll talk about in a little bit as well.
Oh wow, small world.
Yeah, no, he's very helpful actually. And what ended up happening was when I was introduced to Steve, the most important thing, I think, as a life lesson that Steve taught me very early on was that, you can find art that you can afford, and it can mean something very important to you. And the idea of collecting art, I mean, my parents were cultured and had paintings and so forth in the house. I didn't really know what that meant. They were friends. Right. They had paintings. I don't know, like, where'd they get these things? Some of them meant something to me because I thought they were cool looking, and some of them didn't mean anything to me at all. I assume, obviously, they must have to my parents. But when I came to New York and I got to see Steve's work, and saw that it was so available financially. Here I am in my early 20s, and I'm able to afford some original artwork. This blew my mind. Like, I just thought it was the coolest thing that I could walk home after a gig with like 2 or 3 pieces underneath my arm and hang them on my wall and theoretically enjoy them for a while. And it be limited exposure to financial risk. Like, who would have known that? I didn't know anything about art collecting or anything at that point. And Steve taught me that, like, art isn't necessarily about, what it's, if it's worth $1 million, it's about what it means to you. And to that end, like, one of the reasons why we're talking is I ended up making a book about Steve called the Steve Keene Art Book. And the reason why I did it quite legitimately is because I still have those same paintings hanging in my apartment. And each morning I look at them and they make me smile. And that's a gift. And that's
pretty cool.
And that's important. And like, I bought those for $2, $3 back in, 1995 or 97 or whenever exactly it was, but they still make me smile each day. And I think that's really the lesson. And that's in essence why like I said, that's why we're here. I ended up making a book about Steve Keene because his artwork means something to me. And I wanted to show other people why it meant something to me.
Well, let's get into the book, because this is definitely, you can tell it's a passion project. Like there is definitely something, like a connection between you and the artist. Like you can, like, I mean, you gave me a sneak peek into a few things, and, from my look at things and just listening to you talk, there's a lot of people that enjoy artists out there, but not everybody goes and makes a book about that artist, Again,
I blame my parents, like I said earlier. If you leave that in, I was blaming my parents for all of my career mistakes. No, look, I totally get you. I've just been driven to be an advocate for various artists when I feel passionately about something, like the art. It just drives me forward. With Steve, again, and with a lot of projects that I've worked on, it just comes down to, does it have the longevity?
Right.
Like sometimes when I was managing bands, you hope that you have the longevity, and most of the time, honestly, it doesn't. Like it is. I've worked with the Apples for over 20 years. I'm proud of that for sure. But that's an exception, and they're not active right now, so it's easier in some ways. But it's a very difficult thing to continuously work with artists for many reasons, as we can all imagine. But with Steve's work in making this book, to me, it just kind of all came back. I was always in that world, it seemed, from the early 90s on. I kept floating back into his universe. And so I'd come back. So, for example, we talked a little bit about the Threadwaxing Space Live record, for which, just to mention that there's the longest history that I think has ever been published on the Threadwaxing Space is in this book, written by the curator of the space, talking about why he got involved with Steve and what the scene looked like. And so that's part of the book. It's part of his history. It should be.
Right.
I wanted to create a book that really had as much, detail as possible around this, because I think it substantiates how important he is to me. But to move forward from that, I worked with him on records with the Apples. The Apples hired him probably 8 or 10 times for different projects that they were involved with, whether it be singles or albums, certainly 5 or 6 albums, singles, solo projects. He was always doing Robert Schneider's cover artwork. It was almost an exclusive arrangement, it seemed. So I was always working with Steve on and off. And then I also worked with him on a different type of project. I worked on a world music project with a klezmer group called the Klezmatics, who are from New York. They were asked to make an album to make the music for lyrics by Woody Guthrie.
Wow.
As you probably know, Woody Guthrie's, besides maybe Bob Pollard, is more prolific.
Yeah.
But at the time, Woody was probably the most prolific songwriter in American history. And there are a few that compare with him, obviously, for a number of reasons. But he's certainly upper echelon of like prolific nature amongst everything else. Now, back in his day, they didn't necessarily. He wrote the lyrics. He didn't necessarily write the music. So Nora Guthrie came and to the band and said, "Hey, I'd like for you to interpret his lyrics with your klezmer music. Will you make an album or more of stuff?" And I worked with them on this album, and at that time, I was trying to help the band put together the best package rather than just at the time, it was more physical based market. Obviously, we have vinyl. We love vinyl. We can love CDs too. At the time, it was a CD driven market. This was in 2006 ish when we're making and distributing a record. And so we had to make I hope, a great package. And I thought, what would be more appropriate? How are we going to make a great package? I could Photoshop in this, a picture of Woody Guthrie from, the Dust Bowl era, the 50s, 40s and 50s, etc., with the klezmatics, and it'll probably look pretty cheesy, or we could have maybe there's an artist that could paint their resemblances for an album cover. And so I was racking my brain like, oh, well, who should I get to do this? And, it didn't take long to think, oh, well, I was reading, at the time I was also reading about Woody Guthrie. And it turns out Woody's side hustle was as a sign painter.
Oh, wow.
And so Steve paints on wood. He's a sign painter.
Right.
So I just was like, well, there can't be a better match than this. Here's the most prolific at the time, what I thought of as the most prolific American songwriter of all time, mixed with perhaps the most prolific hand painter of all time, perhaps in the world. Like, how could this be this is a perfect match. So Steve created the artwork for the Klezmatics Wonder Wheel album, which, as it would happen, ended up winning a Grammy Award.
Oh, shit.
So he's actually, though it wasn't for category of art direction or for cover image or anything like that, he did work on a Grammy-winning album.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Who gets to do that?
Exactly. So, and I got lucky enough to be able to kind of put all this together. It was just like a fun thing. So I've worked with Steve on so many different things over the years. That album, the Apples albums, I curated a couple shows, and then bringing forward to why the book even exists. At one point, again, I went in and out of his universe. After a few years, we'd cycle in and out. I'd find a project I'd work on, and then I'd, get distracted for a few years, and then I'd come back and have something to do with Steve again. And so in 2013 and 14, I started back into his vortex again, getting back into his vortex. And I offered to try and find him a show in New York because I hadn't seen one in a while. And I was like, hey, would you like a show? Maybe I could find one for you. And he, probably much to his chagrin, said, okay. And so I found him a show. And this is also included in, part of it at least is included in the book, as the story of getting this Brooklyn Public Library show for him. But the book itself is based on the second show that I curated for him, which curated for him, with him. I mean, it's such a collaborative effort, the whole thing. It was with Shepard Fairey out in L.A. I'm sure you're familiar with Shepard Fairey, the screen printer artist of note, known for a lot of things, but probably most noted for Obama Hope, that illustration.
Right.
He had been in and out of my world as well a few times, and I had found out that I had found out from Steve that Steve was a big fan of Shepard Fairey's. One time I was out in LA and I thought, I should get in touch with Shepard about Steve, and see if because Shepard has a gallery out in Los Angeles, and I thought, wow, it would be great if we could do a show maybe with Shepard. Anyway, cut to the chase, and I had forgotten to get in touch with him on this whole trip. I'd been out there for weeks and forgotten to get in touch with Shepard. I don't know him well at that time at all. It's not like I could just pick up the phone and call him. But, I had done some work with him previously. Anyway, funny enough, I was literally my last day there, and I was on Venice Beach kind of just celebrating that it was the end of my trip. And I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't even tried to get in touch with Shepard Fairey. And I looked up his gallery website address, saw that there was a info at Subliminal Projects is the name of his gallery. So I saw there was an email address, info at, right? And I just put Steve Keene in the subject line, or this is how I remember it. And then I put, are you familiar with, and put my name. That's it. That was the email. I just figured if it's going to go through, it's going to go through because he knows who Steve is. And,
right.
There's no other, might as well not like make it too long. Let's pique his interest if he's even paying attention. I mean, obviously he's not paying attention to his own, gallery email because he has like 50 people working for him. Obviously he's not going to pay attention to this. So I just kind of took this chance, and literally I sent that email, and within what feels like a half an hour, I'd gotten an email back from Shepard.
Holy shit.
And I was just like blown away. I was like, and he was like, yeah, I know Steve Keene. What's it to you? It's not what he said, but this is how I'm interpreting it.
Right.
What's it? Yeah, I know Steve Keene. What's it to you, pal? And I just said, Steve's I think I said something like, Steve's a fan and I'm helping him out. And, I don't know, would you want to maybe talk about a show? And he said, come in tomorrow and we'll talk. And so I changed my flight. I went to the Subliminal Projects offices, and it ended up that we ended up doing a show at Shepard's gallery. That's really the reason for the book. I mean, that's how the book really started. If the Subliminal Projects show hadn't happened and hadn't been so successful, I don't think that we'd be here talking right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that just sort of underscored the idea that you were onto something, because you had this noodling in your head.
Well, I knew how important Steve was to me, and I knew how important he was to like virtually all my indie rock friends here in New York, and then some outside of New York as well. I'd like to imply I have lots of friends, but I really don't. No, but seriously, like I thought Steve was important, and sometimes you just take you have to kind of gauge these things. Do you feel like something's happening? Here's Shepard Fairey. I don't, know him. I'm acquainted with him at that point. I know him better now, but I don't know him. I just know that he's a fan, and he's like willing to like have a meeting with me the next day about this artist that I just literally randomly emailed him about. That's pretty cool. And to then to actually a year later, then make a show happen, work with him and his wife curating that show, them being so supportive, and the show going absolutely bonkers great. Like we had Steve because his prices are so low, he normally sells a lot of goods. That's how it works. He sells a lot of pieces. And people are astounded by how many pieces he creates and how many pieces he can sell. This show, it's at a gallery. We had to charge a little bit more for pieces than Steve normally does to make it work. It worked out. We sold like 550 pieces the first night.
Holy.
These are massive pieces too. These are 2 foot by 2 foot pieces that he sold. And so we had a line out the door. And at that point, the first night, everyone can't fit in the gallery. Now, Shepard's popular, but this is not just about a Shepard party. This is about like people going like crazy for Steve's work and like really being supportive. And I think at that point I was certainly exhausted. Steve was, I'm sure, as well. But I thought to myself, make a note, maybe it's time to make a book. Like maybe 6 months from now, when I'm not as exhausted from this experience, maybe there's something to talk about. And, that idea took 6 years to make, but, we're here.
So talk a little bit about that process. Like making a book. Like I have this thing in my head that people that write books or create books, like, write and create books, are on the highest shelf for me. Like, I just think that is the coolest thing that you can do. I have a buddy that just wrote a book, and I I just adore him. Like, I think that that's the coolest thing that you can do. So this is really fabulously cool to me that you're doing this, or that you've done this. So what do we do now? How do we get our hands on it? And, what's the process look like at this point, and that good stuff?
Well, it was just a fascinating thing for me too, to make a book. And I do look at books in that same way. It's anyone that can, fiction versus nonfiction, of course. And this is an art book. So this is a monograph book trying to encapsulate as much of his work as I could, because he's, again, created so much work. One of the things that I wanted to do with this book was to make sure that history talks about Steve in context. And to me, in context is that he is perhaps the most prolific painter in history. And
seems that way, right?
He makes, if you haven't checked it out, there's videos online and so forth that you can check out. But the main thing is that he produces 50 pieces usually at a time in a chain link fence cage that acts as his easel, so that he can hang 50 pieces of wood up that are sometimes 2 foot by 2 foot, a foot by a foot, 11 by 17, various sizes. But he puts up approximately 40 to 60 pieces at a time, and he paints them all at once. And there's 4 of each at a time in each series. So there's, in essence, he's playing, 12 games of chess at a time, painting 4 of a kind, 12 different, in essence, 12 different paintings, 4 of a kind, all at once. So it's this amazing game of tactician, a tactical game of how can I paint this with the color I have right now? What can I fill in on the next painting next door? Because he's doing different paintings at the same time. So his mind has to work in this truly mathematical way that I don't understand, but it's amazing to watch. And it's also it's meditative to watch as well. The way he works is there's a real zenness to his approach. And there's something really beautiful about watching him do this. I'm lucky to have seen him paint, dozens of times. There's something beautiful about that too. So I've lost my train of thought, of course. But where were we again? Sorry.
No. I think
the book?
I think that's a good. I think that what you just gave us is interesting stuff for sure. So definitely don't apologize. But what I'm looking for at this point is, how do I get this book?
Oh, okay. Well, you can get the book from Hat and Beard Press. They're my co-publisher in Los Angeles. And they have, so it's hatandbeard.com.
Hatandbeard.com. I'll put that in the show notes too.
Yeah. If you go there, you can get the book. And it's on right now. It's literally on. There's so much to this book. I could talk about for hours, and I'm sure you are bored with me at this point. But
no, I'm not at all.
But it is on its way right now from Bosnia, where it was printed. By ship, so it's on its way by ship right now.
That must be so exciting for you.
It is. I actually went over to see it get printed and to approve the print run a couple months ago. So I was in Bosnia. So the book has taken me all the way from Los Angeles to of course my home in New York to Bosnia, halfway around the world.
Gee whiz.
To make this book about this artist that I truly admire.
Yeah, that's wild. Bosnia, gee whiz.
And I was there about 2 weeks before the invasion, and so there was a different vibe there. It's about 1,000 miles away from the Ukraine, but it's 1,000 miles. That's not that not that far. And
that's not that far at all.
There's a palpable. There was a palpable sensitivity going on at that time, 2 weeks before this is happening. I was very, very, a little bit odd for sure. I'm glad I went on press because I wanted to make sure the quality was right. And as it would happen, I had color corrections to make on press. That was very important. I'm glad I was there.
Oh.
But by the same token, it was a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And then to get it back from Bosnia, get the books back from Bosnia, it's actually really weird too, because war profiteering has taken hold, and the freight costs went through the roof from the beginning of the process to the end. So it's it's really affected. This sort of fun little passion project has been affected for sure.
Neat. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you about Steve and the book. Apologize that it took so long for us to get together to do this. If only the listeners had an idea of the exchanges that we've had and how Stephen Malcolm has sort of screwed this whole thing up.
No, he really helped, because now you're talking. Now I appreciate. Now we're able to talk, and there's a reason why they're now together touring. Yeah. And this is a reason for celebration. There's a reason for celebration for the Terror Twilight, reissue, and there's a reason, I think, to celebrate for the Steve Keene art book. Oh,
very cool. I like the connection there. Well, Daniel, it's been a blast. I've got to head to my daughter's school because she has skinned her knee apparently. So, major drama here on my end.
Well, I hope your daughter is okay.
Yeah, she's going to be fine. Jesus Christ. Like, it's a skinned knee. The school calling us, telling us, come on. This is so strange. If I go there and her leg is, in bad shape, then I'm going to feel bad for joking about it. But nevertheless. So where can people find more information about you, and would they go to that site that we talked about earlier, or is there a better place to go to learn more about you?
Yeah, hatandbeard.com you can go to, or danielefram.com. That's where my main photography and other book is. So, there's lots of information there.
Awesome. Well, take good care.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so awesome to chat with you. I've really enjoyed your series, so this is a real thrill for me.
Oh, thank you. You don't have to say that, but that's awesome. Thanks.
All right. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks again. And don't forget, wash your hands. Peace out. Meeting Malcolmus, a pavement podcast, is a weekly affair. Connect with JD at meetingmalcolmus.com. Please support the pod by rating, reviewing, or sponsoring us at meetingmalcolmus.com. And hey, I'm social. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Meeting Malcolmus.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So, while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.